Jeopardy!
Our Jeopardy round today features these Harlem Renaissance-oriented categories: redefinition of family, government protest, and African origin. Let's meet the contestants.
Home house husband with 12 kids from Tennessee, Alex Chesick. A marine biologist from Naples, Florida, Kim Peel. A neurosurgeon from Denver, Colorado, Kate Geary. A hairdresser for dogs from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Carly Kenyon. A recently unemployed Jeopardy enthusiast and returning champion, Claire Knack. And your host is yours truly, Redium Lambert. So sit back, relax, grab some popcorn. Now let's get started. Claire, you may begin.
I'll take redefinition of family for 600.
Langston Hughes is one of the most well-known poets of the Harlem Renaissance era. What about his writing made it easier for communities to connect to one another?
Claire had you beat.
What is easy comprehension?
Correct!
According to Carl Vechten, Hughes made his poetry easy for anyone to read, which drew in a variety of audience. Everyone could comprehend it, which allowed for influence in the way that they viewed their communities. By realizing that others were experiencing the same struggles, many found more respect for their communities, and they were able to experience a new sense of American family as a whole in a white-dominated society.
I'll take government and protest for 200.
Name one way African Americans were largely disconnected from their white counterparts, and how did the government respond?
Who is Langston Hughes?
Incorrect.
What is segregation in public places due to laissez-faire?
Correct.
During this period of time, lots of public establishments, such as restaurants and movie theaters and even bathrooms, were racially segregated. Although all of these places were segregated, the government did little to none to stop the separation of races. This was largely due to the mainly laissez-faire policy of government in the 1920s, which meant little to no government involvement in issues.
I'll take African origin for 200.
How did authors create a sense of acceptance among African Americans by writing about their African origins?
What has created a positive stigma about Africa?
Correct. Authors made Africa the central location of cultural influence on African Americans. Authors like Langston Hughes rooted Black beauty to Africa, creating a sense of self-love among Black women. This self-love created a sense of unity and sameness among women of color. They also gave African Americans a broader connection to the world by thinking of themselves as descendants of freed Blacks. By writing about their historical importance, they reassured African Americans of their value.
I'll take government protest for 400.
Even after years of inequality with no change, how were African Americans able to keep up their hope and keep fighting?
Who is Langston Hughes?
Incorrect.
What is writing stories about the hope for the future?
That is correct.
African Americans had many different ways of coping through their inequality based on their different emotions. Some were angry while some were hurt and channeled this emotion into their writing. An example of this is in Langston Hughes' poem, I Too. This poem expresses his struggle of not being accepted by people based on his skin color. He overcomes his struggles by believing that tomorrow will be better. He states in the poem, "Tomorrow I will be at the table." African Americans were able to keep up their hopes by hoping that tomorrow would be a more equal world.
I'll take redefinition of family for 400.
How did Black writers in northern cities use their writings to expand their community to other parts of the country?
Who is Langston Hughes?
Incorrect.
What is newspapers?
Yeah! Way to go, you got it.
According to the Economic History Association, writing was able to circulate in the South through newspapers to provide information about housing, jobs, and social conditions. Its purpose was to expand the Black community and offer a more fulfilling way of life as African Americans could work together. Many Southern African Americans now had a family of friends and relatives in the North that could help with the transition. As we are well past the halfway mark, here is the scoreboard.
In first place with $1,000, we have the reigning champion Claire Knack. In second place with $400, we have Alex Chesick. Tied for third place with $200, we have Kate and Kim. In last place with $0, we have Carly.
I'll take African origin for 600.
How did these authors use poetry to create Afro-American influence?
Who is Langston Hughes?
Incorrect.
What is the use of traditional African styles and formats of poetry?
Correct.
Langston Hughes' poetry often followed similar styles and formats that traditional African poems used. Poetry also helped to integrate African culture into American culture by sharing personal first-hand experiences from Africa. By including these pieces of their African history, poets of the Harlem Renaissance started the Pan-Africanism movement. This was where blacks wanted to unify all African cultures under one shared set of values.
I'll take redefinition of family for 200.
How did African American authors use families in their literature to convey their relationship within their community?
What is by giving a voice to their loved ones?
Correct.
According to Thomas Maloney, writers use their personal experiences and those within their family as a metaphor for those within their community, having the same struggles and success using the world around them to show what life was like as a minority at this time. Giving a voice to their loved ones helps give a voice to everyone around them. We have a category insight. The realization that others are facing the same oppression allows for the extension and togetherness that redefines family and allows for a chance of increased representation in a community.
I'll take government protest for 600.
In what ways did authors use poetry to protest the inequality that existed during the Harlem Renaissance?
Who's Langston Hughes?
Incorrect.
What is through their unique style?
Correct. Authors are able to express their emotions through writing, especially poetry because of its unique style. Famous poets throughout the Harlem Renaissance used poetry to show their struggles and how they dealt with them. We have a category insight. Through the use of literature to protest against the government, African Americans found a new sense of purpose which in return had the effect of bringing families closer together.
I'll take African origin for 400, please.
What are some of the authors during the Harlem Renaissance that wrote about African roots?
Who is Langston Hughes?
Correct! Okay then.
Langston Hughes wrote a poem titled The Negro Speaks of Rivers, where he expresses his ideas that he gathered after traveling to Africa. After his travels, he believed in the beauty of blackness and that black Americans had a prominent place in the history of the world. County Cullen also wrote a poem titled Heritage, where he views Africa as an ancestral home and a place to escape the stereotypes of white civilization. He viewed Africa as a place where black culture was unrestricted. We now have another category insight. By exploring one's roots, values of connectedness can be shaped and a sense of spiritual and emotional grace can be found.
It's time for the final Jeopardy question. The way this works is the correct contestant will double their money. Currently, Kate has $400, Claire has $1,400, she's in first place. Kim has $800, Alex has $1,000, and Carly, well, let's not talk about that.
And here is the final Jeopardy question. What is the common theme among the three categories?
Wow, it looks like Alex is really killing it right now. Do you have it? Celebrating family and interconnectedness through literature during the Harlem Renaissance. Great job, Alex! You doubled your money! You win Jeopardy!